is Ishaan.
Hello, my name is Pallavi.
And welcome to Politics Corner, your crash course in modern-day politics on the international, national, and local stages.
Here, we pride ourselves on easy-to-understand content in the hopes that our fellow Americans will learn and care about their government.
Today, we are discussing Biden's vaccine mandates and Democrats' sneaky plan to subvert the entire justice system.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back and welcome to Politics Corner. Last Thursday, January the 13th, the Supreme Court published 3 rulings, of which we care about 2, both of which consolidated 2 cases. These 2 are 1, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or NFIB, v. OSHA, and 2, Biden v. Missouri. Now before we talk about the rulings, perhaps we should give you a little bit of background. Pallavi?
Yeah, so way back in 1970, Congress enacted 29 U.S.C. 651, which, among other things, created OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to be run by the United States Department of Labor. Last year, Marty Walsh, one of Biden's presidential cabinet members, the U.S. Secretary of Labor, who runs the Department of Labor, signed an executive emergency temporary standard under OSHA. This standard, scheduled to go into effect January 10th of this year, would require nearly all employers with more than 100 employees to mandate COVID-19 vaccinations and require that all unvaccinated employees undergo weekly testing at their own expense and wear a mask in the workplace. Failure to comply would be punished with hefty fines up to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So, OSHA does allow for emergency temporary standards instituted by the Secretary of Labor, but in very few circumstances. It has to. Anytime you're trying to bypass the entire legislative branch of government and unilaterally execute laws, you bear the burden of proving it's a very dire circumstance. Specifically, you have to prove 5 things. 1, that there is a new hazard urgent enough to warrant bypassing Congress. 2, that the hazard exposes employees to grave danger. 3, that the hazard is unique to the workplace. 4, that the emergency temporary standard is absolutely necessary to protect employees against the hazard. And 5, that the emergency temporary standard is tailored to the occupational hazard. Now, Marty Walsh could probably argue that there is a new and urgent hazard which exposes employees to grave danger. However, the hazard is not unique to the workplace. His ETS, or Emergency Temporary Standard, is not tailored to the hazard.
Yeah, right. And you have to understand that the protocol is extremely strict to protect against unjust tyranny. For example, proving that the emergency temporary standard is tailored to the occupational hazard means that you are only implementing the standard when it's necessary. For example, you can require that all construction workers wear hard hats, but you can't mandate that baristas do because they don't face the same risk. Similarly, it makes sense to mandate that the COVID-19 test administrators be vaccinated, but there is not necessarily the same rationale for requiring plumbers to be vaccinated. Several states, nonprofits, and corporations attempted to challenge this mandate, but some of us might ask, how did it get to the Supreme Court? Well, to help answer the question, here's Vox.
A case probably falls into one of 3 categories describing most Supreme Court cases. The first is a case of national importance, such as when the court decided Bush v. Gore in order to help determine who had won the 2000 presidential election. A second type of case is when a lower court issues a ruling that invalidates federal law. An example is Gonzalez v. Raich, in which Angel Raich, a California woman, challenged federal drug laws after agents destroyed marijuana plants she had been consuming for medical use. On her appeal in the Ninth Circuit, judges ruled in favor of Raich, deciding that she was compliant with the state law authorizing her use of medical pot. But that ruling conflicted with federal law prohibiting marijuana use. Third, the court accepts cases in order to resolve a split decision in the lower courts. This happened in the case of Obergefell v. Hodges, where a Sixth Circuit ruling that banned same-sex marriage conflicted with rulings in other circuits that had upheld the right to same-sex marriage.
Now, many different entities tried to challenge the mandate in various courts of appeals before the Fifth Circuit entered a stay, which would prevent the mandate from going into effect. However, the Sixth Circuit lifted the Fifth Circuit stay, creating a dispute between the courts. So at this point, the challengers had gained national importance, and the Supreme Court elected to hear expedited arguments on January 7th to decide on granting the injunctive stay or not, which would prevent the mandate from going into effect while it was duked out in the courts.
The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, granted the injunction this Thursday, blocking OSHA's mandate. They preambled their 30-page decision, writing, quote, "Applicants now seek emergency relief from this court, arguing that OSHA's mandate exceeds its statutory authority and is otherwise unlawful. Agreeing that applicants are likely to prevail, we grant their application and stay the rule." This is incredibly important. Every time the Supreme Court rules on anything, they are setting a jurisprudence for how cases like it in the future should be ruled on.
In this case, the jurisprudence they set was, quote, "Administrative agencies are creatures of statute. They accordingly possess only the authority that Congress has provided." The question then is whether 29 U.S.C. 651 plainly authorizes the Secretary's mandate. It does not. The Act empowers the Secretary to set workplace safety standards, not broad public health measures. The court ruled that OSHA enables the Department of Labor to regulate occupational safety, and COVID-19 is not an occupational danger. And they continued in their decision, quote, "Although COVID-19 is a risk that occurs in many workplaces, it is not an occupational hazard in most. COVID-19 can and does spread at home, in schools, during sporting events, and everywhere else that people gather. Permitting OSHA to regulate the hazards of daily life, simply because most Americans have jobs and face those same risks while on the clock, would significantly expand OSHA's regulatory authority without clear congressional authorization."
Now, the dissent. Justice Sotomayor, Breyer, and Kagan claimed that this mandate is similar to a fire or sanitation regulation, to which the majority upheld a vaccine mandate is not comparable to any other OSHA mandate because a vaccine is permanent. You can't just be vaccinated while on the clock. In conclusion, they wrote, quote, "The applications for stays are granted, pending disposition of the applicant's petitions for review. The order shall terminate upon sending down of the judgment of this court. It is so ordered."
Okay, now I am tired of hearing that this is some corrupt process by which this mandate was not upheld. All right, Biden tried to get this mandate through Congress. All right, he failed. On December 8th, 2021, the Senate, by a majority vote, disapproved of the vaccine regulation. Okay, Biden couldn't even align all the members of his own party under vaccine regulations, so he turned around and thought about how he could potentially unilaterally enforce a plainly overreaching law. If anything, I am here to criticize the 3 justices who dissented this ruling. Honestly, right now, progressives don't even care about the enabling authority of OSHA. They don't care if it's actually legal. All they care about is the fact that they have failed to establish authoritarian rule in America. But Pallavi, can you tell us a little bit? So, a lot of progressives, and a lot of left-wing people in general, they were talking about how this vaccine mandate should be allowed simply because we've allowed vaccine mandates in the past. Well, first of all, I just want to clarify, he did this another way. He tried to use OSHA. This is a completely different legal system than cases like Jacobson versus Massachusetts. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, right. So Jacobson versus Massachusetts is pretty much the precedence that's been used to enact a lot of the COVID measures, right? Whether we're talking about stay-at-home orders or mask requirements or vaccine requirements. So let's talk about the example when Supreme Court did uphold the vaccine mandate. The year was back in 1905, and Massachusetts required smallpox vaccinations for all adults over 21. And a man called Jacobson sued the state, and the case was heard by the Supreme Court.
They upheld that the vaccine mandate was constitutional simply because the individual liberty had to come at the cost of the risk to the general public. So in this particular scenario, what they said was that reasonable regulations for the safety of the general public are permissible.
Right. So why is this case today different? I think one factor which was not really talked about, but I definitely think has played a part, is the effectiveness of the vaccination in question. So the ruling we were referencing was in 1905, whereas the smallpox vaccination was developed in 1798. So there was 100 years of evidence on the effectiveness. We already know that the vaccine for COVID-19 is ineffective on at least the Omicron variant and probably the next variants as well. But I think this rather neatly rolls us over to a fan favorite. Drum roll, please. Propaganda paralysis.
Propaganda paralysis.
propaganda paralysis. Here we break down partisan drivel and reveal the cold, hard truth. This week, while hearing expedited arguments, Justice Sotomayor had something really interesting she just wanted to throw out there.
That are almost at full capacity with people is severely ill on ventilators. We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
Really?
100,000 children.
Wow.
In critical condition.
Yeah, where is she getting her data?
Where is she getting her data? I don't know. But if that's real, then we should declare, I don't even know, like a worldwide emergency, because total US deaths related to COVID-19 are at 800,000 right now. So you're telling me that 1/8 of that number of children are in critical condition because of COVID-19. Okay, in Texas a week ago, we had 400 children hospitalized with COVID-19 total. Not even critical condition, and that's just with COVID-19, not necessarily for COVID-19. In fact, many of these children, as doctors noted, only discovered that they had COVID-19 after a positive PCR test after coming in for different issues. Okay, ABC News says that every week approximately 378 children are admitted to hospitals because of COVID-19. So the last thing that the world needs right now is a Supreme Court justice, someone who is inherently in a position of power, in a position of authority, who people trust, to be ad-libbing just outlandish, fictitious numbers.
Seriously. Now, this is not to downplay the effects of COVID-19 and the rampant infections that are at stake here. But let's call it out for what this is. This is an administrative catastrophe. This is the President of the United States trying to mobilize his base using a charged-up rhetoric. This is the President of the United States that called on Trump to resign from office for losing so many lives on his watch, having now well surpassed Trump's number. So he's looking to have something to show on his part to abate COVID-19.
Alrighty, so a lot of progressives are up in arms about this, and I have heard so much nonsense about how, of course, the Supreme Court voted this way because it's a Republican bench. Nonsense. Sheer nonsense. Here's one of my favorites, CGP.
It's the 9 court justices that both referee and adjust the laws. So if you're playing the game for pure maximum political advantage, you want to influence the refs. Now, to be above this influence, each justice serves for life, so appointing a new one is an irreversible decision that will affect decades of law. Of course, the whole point of justices serving for life is so once in, they are politically beholden to no one and don't have to strategically plan how their current rulings will affect their next career move. Getting on the Supreme Court is the final move.
What was that? Sorry. Need that again? Rewind. Okay? Justices serve for life. They are politically beholden to nobody. I love when people try to debate me on random stuff happening in government without understanding the basic government system protections against the thing that they are claiming happened.
Right. I mean, becoming a Supreme Court justice is the end goal. Like, there is nothing you go beyond there. So then they basically rule how they see fit in the interpretation of the Constitution.
Exactly. So when you see a Supreme Court ruling, you should believe, and yes, this is not to say that, politicians, when they elect Supreme Court justices, that they are not very strategically picking them, hoping that they can influence the government. But the point is, the Supreme Court justices themselves, they're not voting to please somebody. They're voting because they believe that this is the correct interpretation of the law.
Besides, we said in the beginning that there were 2 mandates at hand here. One was the broad OSHA mandate, which tried to use this roundabout procedure to indirectly require Americans to get vaccinated. But in the second case, Biden versus Missouri and Becerra versus Louisiana, regarding requiring health care workers in facilities that receive Medicare or Medicaid funding to be vaccinated, the court actually upheld the mandate. The court opined, quote, "The district court order granting a preliminary injunction is stayed pending the disposition of the government's appeal." So stop promulgating the lie that the court is overly political. The framers of the Constitution intentionally didn't institute any kind of term for the Supreme Court justices because they wanted the court to be removed from politics. Getting onto the Supreme Court, as I said, is the end goal. Justices are politically beholden to nobody. And by the way, in staying the injunction for the OSHA mandate, all the Supreme Court has actually said is that there is not sufficient justification to force upwards of 84 million Americans to be vaccinated against their will, while the legality and the legality of this mandate is going to be decided by the US Court of Appeals. So they've just punted it back.
So anyway, now Democrats are scrambling, right? They've tried everything. Okay, they've tried turning January 6th into musical theater, spectacle for the ages. Right? Yeah, that lasted for all of one day, maybe, if you can even call it that, before left-wing politicians continued to, make a spectacle of it, but the rest of the world just moved on with their lives.
Right.
Okay, here's Nancy Pelosi, whose eyebrows, mind you, are no longer attached to her head. Okay, they're like a halo of an angel. They inhabit the space around her head, but they're not necessarily anchored there, okay? Like she's talking at this level, but her eyebrows are just moving up here at this level. All right, it's like the Monopoly Man. Here we go.
There's nothing more important for us to do than protect our Constitution and our democracy. What the Republicans are doing across the country is really a legislative continuation of what they did on January 6th, which is to undermine our democracy.
She was talking about the Voter Rights Act. All right, so now Biden and company are claiming that there is about 50,000 reserve Democrats across the nation. All right, and they've been repressed and they're not allowed to vote. Because according to Democrats, a black person can try walking into the DMV to get a photo ID, but then there's going to be a lady. Okay, that lady's going to be behind the counter and that lady's going to look at that black person and go, "Get out of here, we don't serve your kind. Go stand next to that separate water fountain." Okay, this is total nonsense at this point, okay? You need a photo ID for virtually anything in the United States, and if you can't afford it, it's also free, okay? So nobody is being told that they somehow can't vote. Democrats are basically trying to do what porcupines do, which is bulk up to make themselves look big because they're threatened and they've been backed into a corner by their own accord.
Right. I mean, I was watching Fox and Friends the other day, and they had Ben Shapiro on, and it takes one of the anchors about 2 minutes just to get through a bullet point list of all the presidential failures over the last week alone.
I mean, seriously, Biden's approval rating is so low that it has broken through the crust of the earth, through the core, and come out the other side. Right? So it's rather clear that Democrats are having a rough time, but you have to understand, Democrats have seldom, in recent history, simply accepted when they've lost, and they are marvelously consistent. It is one of the very few things that we can compliment them on. January 7th, Elizabeth Warren opened her big mouth and tweeted, "To rebalance our judiciary, restore this institution, and live up to the ideal of equal justice under law, we must, #expand the court." Now, this tweet was referencing a Democrat plan in the works since April last year. Okay? Now, this plan is to add 4 justices, undoubtedly liberals, to the bench. Coincidentally, just enough to score a majority.
Oh, and by the way, did you hear about the other plan to institute limits on Supreme Court justices? Though most legal scholars say that would be unconstitutional, and given that the Supreme Court justices themselves would have to decide if it's unconstitutional, I'm not putting a lot of money on them letting this pass.
I mean, yes, I wouldn't trust Democrats to do governmental schemes much either, but going back to just adding of justices, even the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's a liberal justice, okay? I think that she was a fantastic justice, but she is a liberal. So she even said, quote, "If anything would make the court look partisan, it would be one side saying, when we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number of judges so more people would vote the way we want them to."
Right. I mean, Justice Stephen Breyer, another liberal justice, said, quote, "If the public sees judges as politicians in robes, its confidence in the courts and in the rule of law itself can only diminish."
Yeah. Okay, so this is absolute garbage, dirty political scheming. Right? The last time that the Supreme Court actually added justices was in 1869. Right? That is how long we have gone without this type of partisan interference in the judiciary.
So another quote that supports this came from the Republican Senate caucus, and it said, "Once the court has been so clearly politicized, there is no limit to how many times it can be packed. But it only has to happen once to destroy the court's reputation for independence." Very true.
Here's the thing, if Dems think that this will work, it won't. Okay, sure, they might, through some convoluted 18th century provision, find a way to add more justices to the court. and then the moment that the Congress or the presidency is of a different color, they will do the same. It is a temporary partisan win, but a long-term blow to the credibility and independence of the court and to the United States government as a whole. And if you care about that, you should oppose this. All in all, Democrats, despite having power in the executive office, the Senate, and the House, have not started 2022 well. Their half-baked policies and divisive agenda continue to harm their own future, and you can count on us to bring you more as developments arise.
We want to thank you for watching this episode of Politics Corner.
If you want to get involved in politics but you don't know where to start or who to trust, then Politics Corner is great for you. Here we give you bite-sized crash courses in modern-day politics, how government affects you, and how you can get involved.
We pride ourselves in getting you the most accurate, up-to-date political analysis on the key issues.
If you want to hear more from us, follow us on Instagram at Politics Corner Official, or subscribe to us on YouTube or your favorite podcasting service.
I'm Pallavi Sharma.
And I'm Ishaan Prasad.
And thank you for watching Politics Corner.